January 14th, 2026, 2:47 a.m. Southern Kherson Oblast. 16 men, 4 inflatable craft, electric motors barely humming above the current, 0 radio transmissions. The Dnipro River is 1.2 kilometers wide at this crossing point. Water temperature, 2 degrees Celsius. Survival time, if submerged without thermal protection, 11 minutes. On the far bank, Russian thermal surveillance posts scan the waterline every 90 seconds. Automated motion sensors are buried along the mudflats. A reinforced platoon of Russian territorial defense troops mans observation bunkers spaced 800 meters apart. None of them see a thing. Because for the past 3 weeks, Ukraine has been watching them, mapping every patrol route, timing every rotation, logging every gap, and tonight, those gaps become doorways. I'm your host at Ukraine Signal, where we analyze the battles that change wars. This is the story of how 16 Ukrainian Special Operations fighters from the 73rd Maritime Special Purpose Center crossed one of the most heavily surveilled rivers in Europe, infiltrated 3.2 kilometers behind Russian lines, and destroyed an electronic warfare complex that had been blinding Ukrainian forces across an entire front sector. No air support, no armored backup, no second chances. Just precision, courage, and 3 weeks of preparation compressing into a single night that would restore Ukrainian eyes in the sky over southern Kherson. Let's break it down. To understand why this mission happened, you need to understand what Ukraine lost in the weeks before it. Late December 2025. Ukrainian drone units operating in the southern Kherson sector begin reporting a disturbing pattern. FPV drones launched toward Russian positions east of the Dnipro are losing control links at ranges that should be well within operational parameters. Reconnaissance drones flying at altitudes above 500 meters experience GPS spoofing so severe their navigation systems think they are over the Black Sea, 40 kilometers south of their actual position. Within a week, the problem escalates. Ukrainian forces across a 40-kilometer stretch of front lose nearly all drone capability. Strike drones spin out of control mid-flight. Surveillance feeds cut to static. Operators who had been running 6 to 8 sorties per day are grounded. The effect on Ukrainian positions is immediate and dangerous. Without drone reconnaissance, Ukrainian artillery cannot confirm targets. Fire missions drop by 60%. Russian infantry begins moving more freely, resupplying forward positions that Ukrainian strikes had previously kept isolated. 2 Russian company-sized probes push toward Ukrainian observation posts along the western bank, exploiting the sudden intelligence blackout. Ukrainian signals intelligence teams triangulate the source within days. The jamming signatures match a known Russian electronic warfare configuration, a Pol 21 GPS denial system operating in conjunction with a Zytel R330ZH communications jammer. The combination is devastating. The Pol 21 generates a GPS denial bubble across the entire operational area, while the Zytel disrupts the command and control frequencies Ukrainian drone operators depend on. Satellite imagery confirms what SIGINT suspected. A converted agricultural warehouse 3.2 kilometers from the eastern bank of the Dnipro is hosting the EW complex. Thermal signatures show vehicle-mounted antenna arrays concealed under camouflage netting. Power generation equipment sits behind the structure. A small security element occupies defensive positions around the perimeter. The Russians have hidden their electronic warfare crown jewels inside a building that, from the air, looks like any other abandoned farm structure in the Kherson countryside. Which weapon system was more critical to this operation? Suppressed firearms, breaching charges, or the intelligence that found the target? Drop your answer in the comments below. Ukrainian military intelligence faces a decision. They can attempt to destroy the EW complex with long-range precision strikes. HIMARS or GMLRS rockets could reach it. Storm Shadow cruise missiles could flatten the warehouse entirely. But there is a problem. The Pol 21 system is vehicle-mounted. The moment the Russians detect incoming fire, they can relocate the jamming equipment within minutes. A missile strike might destroy the building, but miss the actual electronic warfare hardware entirely. The Russians would simply set up again at another location, and Ukraine would lose weeks hunting for a system that can be operational again within hours of moving. The alternative is a direct action mission. Boots on the ground. Operators who can confirm the equipment is present before destroying it, Who can plant charges directly on the EW hardware rather than hoping a rocket hits the right building? The 73rd Maritime Special Purpose Center gets the call. This unit traces its lineage to Soviet-era naval special forces but has been transformed through years of combat experience and Western training partnerships into one of Ukraine's premier direct action units. Their specialty: amphibious operations, river crossings, coastal raids, exactly the kind of mission that most special operations units never train for, because most wars do not feature a major river as a central front line. The Dnipro is not most rivers. Stay with me. What happens over the next 4 hours will restore Ukrainian drone capability across an entire sector and demonstrate why special operations remain decisive in an age dominated by technology. Mission planning begins on January 2, 2026. 12 days before execution. The intelligence preparation is exhaustive. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones, the few that can still operate at extreme low altitudes beneath the worst of the jamming, conduct mapping flights along the eastern bank. Every flight is a risk. The operators fly at treetop level, hugging terrain features to minimize exposure to the very jamming they are trying to defeat. Some drones are lost. The operators accept the cost. What they build over 12 days is a detailed picture of Russian defensive positions along a 6-kilometer stretch of riverbank. Thermal surveillance posts are identified at 4 locations. Each post operates on a predictable rotation. 2 soldiers manning thermal imaging equipment for 4-hour shifts, with approximately 90 seconds of dead time during shift changes. The shift changes happen at midnight, 4 a.m., 8 a.m., and noon. Motion sensors are mapped along the mudflats where the eastern bank meets the water. The sensors appear to be seismic type, triggered by footfall patterns. The intelligence team notes that the sensors are positioned on firm ground above the waterline, but do not extend into the flooded reed beds that border the river for approximately 200 meters inland from the bank. A Russian territorial defense platoon, approximately 30 soldiers, occupies 3 positions within the crossing zone. Their patrol routes follow established paths between bunkers. The patrols are regular, almost mechanical. The soldiers are not elite troops. They are older reservists assigned to what the Russian command clearly considers a quiet sector. The security detail at the EW complex itself is smaller than expected, 8 to 10 soldiers, likely from a signals unit rather than dedicated infantry. They man 2 observation posts on the northern and eastern approaches to the warehouse. The southern approach, through the flooded reed beds, appears unmonitored. The Russians have not placed sensors or observation posts covering terrain they apparently consider impassable. That assumption is about to cost them everything. The mission plan takes shape. 16 operators divided into 4 elements of 4. 2 assault elements, 1 security element, 1 support element. The assault elements will breach the warehouse and destroy the EW equipment. The security element will establish blocking positions on the northern and eastern approaches to intercept any Russian quick reaction force. The support element will remain at the landing zone with the inflatable craft, maintaining the extraction route. The crossing itself is the most dangerous phase. 1.2 kilometers of open water, 4 low-profile inflatable craft, each carrying 4 operators plus equipment. Electric trolling motors provide propulsion, nearly silent at low speed, but slow. Crossing time estimate 14 minutes. The operators will carry suppressed weapons, HK-416 rifles with subsonic ammunition. Each assault team member also carries pre-configured thermite charges, designed to reach temperatures exceeding 2,200 degrees Celsius, sufficient to melt through the sensitive electronic components of the EW systems beyond any possibility of repair. The date is selected based on 3 factors. Moon phase. January 14th falls during a new moon period. Cloud cover. Meteorological forecasts predict heavy overcast with fog, likely along the river valley. And the diversionary operation. Ukrainian artillery units 12 kilometers south will execute a pre-planned fire mission against known Russian positions, drawing attention and response forces away from the crossing zone. The timing is precise. Artillery diversionary fire begins at 2:30 a.m. Crossing launches at 2:47 a.m. Estimated landing on the eastern bank, 3:01 a.m. Movement through the reed beds to the target compound, 35 to 40 minutes. Target action, 3:40 to 3:55 a.m. Extraction begins no later than 4:15 a.m. before nautical twilight at 5:22 a.m. starts to lighten the eastern sky. Every minute is accounted for, every contingency mapped, but no plan survives first contact perfectly. The operators know this better than anyone. January 14th, 2026, 2:30 a.m. 12 kilometers south of the crossing point, Ukrainian artillery opens fire. 6 152mm howitzers and two 2S-1 Gvozdika self-propelled guns begin a sustained bombardment of Russian positions along a 2-kilometer front. The shells crash into known bunker positions, supply routes, and a vehicle staging area. The fire is real, not simulated. Russian positions take actual damage. The response is immediate. Russian counter-battery radar activates, trying to locate the Ukrainian guns. Russian communications traffic spikes as frontline units report incoming fire and request support. The territorial defense units along the riverbank go to heightened alert, but their attention turns south, toward the sounds of battle echoing across the flatlands. At the crossing point, the night is silent, except for the slow current of the Dnipro. 2:47 a.m. 4 inflatable craft push off from concealed positions among the reed beds on the western bank. The operators have waterproofed their weapons and equipment in dry bags. Each man wears a thin neoprene layer beneath his tactical gear. It will not save them if they go into the water, but it buys minutes. The electric motors engage. Almost no sound. The craft move in a staggered line formation, each boat separated by approximately 40 meters. The lead craft carries a forward observer using a passive thermal monocular to scan the eastern bank. The Dnipro is calm, low wind. The heavy overcast blocks any starlight. Visibility on the water, less than 50 meters. The operators navigate using preloaded GPS waypoints on devices shielded from the Russian jamming by frequency hopping encryption, a technical workaround developed specifically for this mission. At 2:53 a.m., the lead craft operator signals a halt. Through the thermal monocular, he detects a heat signature on the eastern bank, a Russian sentry moving along the waterline. The figure pauses, appears to scan the river with handheld optics, then continues walking south. The operators wait. 2 minutes. The sentry moves out of the detection zone. The crossing resumes. At 3:02 a.m., 1 minute behind schedule, the first craft reaches the eastern bank. The operators do not beach the craft on the open mudflat. Instead, they guide it into the flooded reed beds, where dense vegetation 3 meters tall conceals their arrival. The second, third, and fourth craft follow at 30-second intervals. All 16 operators are on the eastern bank by 3:06 a.m. No alarms, no illumination flares, no change in Russian communications traffic. Phase 1 is complete. The operators cache their life jackets and dry bags at the landing zone. The support element of 4 men remains with the craft, establishing a low-profile security perimeter and monitoring Russian radio frequencies on a passive receiver. If the mission is compromised, these 4 men will be the first warning. The 3 remaining elements, 12 operators, begin moving south-southeast through the reed beds toward the target compound. The terrain is brutal, knee-deep water, thick mud beneath, reed stalks that grab at equipment and clothing. Every step is deliberate. Every footfall placed to minimize noise and avoid the seismic sensors mapped on firmer ground to their east. The formation moves in a single file, each operator maintaining visual contact with the man ahead through night vision devices. Movement rate, approximately 120 meters every 10 minutes. Agonizingly slow. But silence is absolute. How many Russian soldiers were guarding the EW complex? By A, 4 to 6, B, 8 to 10, C, 15 to 20. The answer comes at the end. At 3:28 a.m., the lead element reaches the edge of the reed beds. Ahead, across 300 meters of open ground, the agricultural warehouse sits dark against the overcast sky. Through thermal optics, the operators confirm what intelligence predicted. 2 sentries visible, one at the northern approach, one at the eastern, both stationary. No movement from inside the warehouse. A generator runs on the south side, its thermal plume visible on night vision. The assault team leader radios a single coded transmission via a low-power encrypted burst, 3 clicks on the radio. The signal means target confirmed, proceeding to assault positions. The 12 operators split. Assault Element Alpha moves east through a drainage ditch to approach the warehouse from the south. Assault Element Bravo loops north through dead ground to position on the western face. The security element takes position at a road junction 200 meters north, where any Russian reinforcements would approach. The movement takes 11 minutes. By 3:39 a.m., all elements report ready. At the warehouse, the two visible sentries show no awareness. The northern sentry is seated in a folding chair beside a sandbagged position. The eastern sentry leans against the building wall, occasionally checking a mobile phone whose screen glow is visible through night vision at 200 meters. Neither is wearing night vision equipment. The assault team leader studies the building for a final 60 seconds. Two vehicle-mounted antenna arrays under camouflage netting on the east side, confirming the pole 21. A smaller antenna configuration on the roof, likely the Jetel system. Cable runs between the antennas and the warehouse interior. Power cables from the generator. Everything intelligence promised is here. 3:40 a.m. The assault begins. Subscribe to Ukraine Signal if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what happens in the next 15 minutes is a textbook example of how special operations forces can achieve what cruise missiles cannot. Assault Element Alpha engages first. Two operators with suppressed HK-416 rifles eliminate the eastern sentry with synchronized shots from 40 meters. The subsonic 5.56mm rounds make no more noise than a heavy book dropping on a wooden floor. The sentry collapses without transmitting an alarm. Simultaneously, a sniper from the security element engages the northern sentry with a suppressed rifle at 180 meters. One round. The target drops from the chair. Elapsed time from first shot to both sentries down, less than 2 seconds. Alpha element moves immediately to the southern entrance of the warehouse. The door is a sliding agricultural gate, partially open. Two operators stack on the entrance. A third prepares a flashbang grenade. Bravo element reaches the western wall and identifies a personnel door. This entrance is locked. A breaching operator places a pre-cut strip charge on the hinges. The assault team leader keys his radio twice. 2 clicks. Execute. The flashbang detonates inside the warehouse through the southern entrance. The strip charge blows the western door inward, a fraction of a second later. 8 operators flow into the structure from 2 directions. Inside, the warehouse has been converted into a functional electronic warfare operations center. 2 Kamaz trucks carry the pole 21 GPS jamming arrays. A third, smaller vehicle mounts the Jetel communications jammer. Folding tables hold monitoring equipment, laptops, and communications gear. Cables snake across the concrete floor. And there are people inside. The assault teams find 6 Russian signals personnel. 2 are asleep on cots in a partitioned section. 2 are seated at monitoring stations. 1 is in what appears to be a makeshift kitchen area. The 6th is emerging from a latrine at the rear of the building. The engagement is brief and one-sided. The Ukrainian operators are trained for exactly this scenario. Close quarters battle in a confined space with both combatants and sensitive equipment. Every shot is aimed. Every target is engaged with controlled pairs. In 12 seconds, the interior is secure. All 6 Russian signals personnel are neutralized. 2 additional soldiers are found in a vehicle outside the northern wall, apparently sleeping in the cab of a support truck. The security element handles them. Total Russian personnel at the site, 10. Matching intelligence estimates precisely. The assault teams immediately transition to the demolition phase. This is the core of the mission. The physical destruction of the electronic warfare hardware. Each assault team carries 4 thermite charges, pre-assembled and fitted with timed detonators. The charges are placed directly on the critical components. 2 charges on the Pole 21 transmitter arrays inside the Kamaz trucks. 2 charges on the Jetel jammer hardware. 1 charge on each of the 2 antenna control units, 1 charge on the server and monitoring equipment on the folding tables, 1 charge held in reserve. The thermite is the weapon of choice for a reason. Unlike explosive charges, which would create a massive blast signature alerting every Russian unit within kilometers, thermite burns intensely, silently. At 2,200 degrees Celsius, thermite melts through steel, aluminum, copper, and silicon with equal ease. The sensitive electronic components, the circuit boards, the frequency generators, the antenna feeds, will be reduced to molten slag. No possibility of repair, no possibility of recovery. The charges are placed in 4 minutes. Detonators are set for a 10-minute delay, giving the team time to extract before the fires begin. 3:56 a.m. The assault team leader confirms all charges placed and armed. He keys his radio 3 times, 3 clicks. Mission complete. Extract. The 12 operators withdraw from the compound using the same route they approached. Movement discipline remains absolute despite the adrenaline. They re-enter the reed beds and begin the trek back to the river. Behind them, the warehouse sits silent. The timer on 8 thermite charges counts down in the darkness. At 4:06 a.m., the thermite ignites. The effect is not an explosion. There is no concussive blast, no shockwave that would register on Russian acoustic sensors. Instead, brilliant white light erupts inside the warehouse as each charge burns through its target. The temperature inside the building rises catastrophically. Within seconds, the camouflage netting catches fire. The fuel tanks on the KAMAZ trucks ignite. Now there is fire visible for kilometers, but by the time Russian forces can respond, the critical damage is done. The Pol 21 transmitter arrays are melted. The antenna feed assemblies are destroyed. The Zetel jammer hardware is fused into unrecognizable metal. The servers holding operational software and frequency configurations are slag. If you believe tactics win wars, type Ukraine signal in the comments, because this is the kind of operation that no amount of artillery can replicate. At the river, the extraction is already underway. The support element has the inflatable craft in the water, motors running. The first operators reach the landing zone at 4:11 a.m. Loading is rapid. By 4:18 a.m., all 16 operators are on the water heading west. On the eastern bank, the glow of the burning warehouse is now visible. Russian communications traffic explodes with confusion. The territorial defense units report a fire at the EW site. A quick reaction force is dispatched from a garrison 8 kilometers east, but they are responding to a fire, not an attack. It takes them 20 minutes to reach the compound. By then, the Ukrainian operators are already past the halfway point of the river crossing. At 4:32 a.m., all 4 inflatable craft reach the western bank. 16 operators, 0 casualties, 0 wounded, all equipment accounted for. The mission has lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes from launch to landing. On the eastern bank, Russian soldiers arriving at the warehouse find a scene of total destruction. The building is engulfed in flames. The vehicles inside are burning. The electronic warfare equipment that had given Russia dominance over the electromagnetic spectrum in this sector is completely destroyed. It will take Russian electronic warfare units 3 weeks to deploy a replacement system to the area. 3 weeks during which Ukrainian drones will own the sky. The immediate effect of the operation is measurable within hours. By 8 a.m. on January 14th, Ukrainian drone operators in the southern Kherson sector report that jamming interference has dropped to negligible levels. GPS signals are clean. Command and control links are stable. For the first time in 3 weeks, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones launch without fear of losing navigation or control. The first sortie spots a Russian resupply convoy that had been operating freely during the jamming blackout. 3 trucks moving along a dirt road 4 kilometers from the front line. Within 20 minutes, Ukrainian artillery destroys all 3 vehicles using drone-corrected fire. That is just the beginning. Over the next 48 hours, Ukrainian forces launch over 200 reconnaissance and strike drone sorties across the 40-kilometer sector. The intelligence harvest is enormous. Russian trench positions that had been improved during the blackout are mapped and targeted. Ammunition storage points are identified and struck. 3 Russian armored vehicles that had been moved forward under the cover of EW protection are spotted and destroyed by FPV kamikaze drones. The cumulative effect is devastating for Russian operations in the sector. Resupply convoys that had moved openly are forced back to nighttime-only operations. Infantry positions that had been reinforced are hit with precision artillery. The tactical advantage Russia gained through electronic warfare is not merely negated, it is reversed, as Ukrainian forces exploit the period of restored capability to degrade Russian positions far more aggressively than before the jamming began. Ukrainian military intelligence estimates that in the 48 hours following the destruction of the EW complex, Russian forces in the southern Kherson sector suffered the loss of 14 vehicles, approximately 35 to 40 personnel casualties, and significant disruption to their logistics network. All of this traced back to the work of 16 operators on a single night. The strategic lessons of this operation extend far beyond one burning warehouse. First, the mission demonstrates the continued relevance of special operations forces in a war dominated by technology. Drones, precision missiles, and electronic warfare systems have transformed the battlefield. But when the question becomes not whether you can hit a target, but whether you can confirm the target is actually there before you hit it, human operators on the ground remain irreplaceable. A HIMARS strike on the warehouse might have missed the mobile equipment. A storm shadow might have flattened the building while the Pole 21 trucks were parked elsewhere for maintenance. Only operators who could physically enter the structure and verify the equipment before destroying it could guarantee mission success. What would NATO have done differently if faced with this same electronic warfare challenge? Comment your analysis below. Second, the operation highlights Ukraine's mastery of a critical but underappreciated military discipline: intelligence preparation of the battlefield. The 12 days of reconnaissance that preceded the mission were as important as the assault itself. Mapping Russian thermal posts, timing sentry rotations, identifying the gap in sensor coverage through the reed beds, understanding that the Russian security detail was signals personnel, not infantry. Every piece of intelligence reduced risk and increased the probability of success. Third, the mission shows the vulnerability of electronic warfare systems to direct action. Russia has invested heavily in EW capability precisely because it degrades Ukraine's greatest asymmetric advantage, drone warfare. But EW systems are large, power-hungry, and difficult to conceal completely. They generate electromagnetic signatures that can be detected and localized, and once found, they present high-value targets whose destruction has effects far disproportionate to the cost of the operation. The 16 operators who crossed the Dnipro carried perhaps $200,000 worth of personal equipment, weapons, and demolition charges. The Pole 21 and Jatel systems they destroyed are valued at approximately $15 to $20 million. The cost-exchange ratio favors Ukraine by a factor of nearly 100 to 1, but the true value is not measured in dollars. It is measured in the 200 drone sorties that followed, in the 14 Russian vehicles destroyed, in the 40 casualties inflicted, in the 3 weeks of restored capability across an entire front sector. The ripple effects of a single special operations mission multiplied through the entire Ukrainian war machine. Fourth, and perhaps most important, the operation demonstrates Ukrainian innovation in the face of adversity. When Russian EW systems shut down their drone capability, Ukrainian forces did not simply wait for the jamming to end. They adapted. They found the source. They developed a plan that combined traditional special operations skills with modern intelligence methods. They executed a river crossing that most NATO armies would consider extremely high risk, using equipment and techniques refined through years of fighting along the Dnipro. Ukraine does not just use weapons. Ukraine invents new ways to fight. And when technology fails, Ukrainian warriors find other ways to win. The 73rd Maritime Special Purpose Center has not publicly commented on the operation. Ukrainian military intelligence released only a brief video showing the burning warehouse, with no operational details disclosed. The identities of the 16 operators remain classified, but the results speak for themselves. In the weeks following the raid, Russian electronic warfare deployments in the Kherson sector became noticeably more cautious. EW systems were moved further from the front line, reducing their effectiveness. Security details were reinforced, diverting infantry from other duties. The Russians understood that their electronic warfare advantage, so powerful in theory, was only as strong as their ability to protect the physical hardware that generated it. And along the western bank of the Dnipro, Ukrainian drone operators went back to work, launching reconnaissance flights, guiding artillery, hunting Russian positions with FPV kamikaze drones that cost $500 each and destroy targets worth thousands of times more. The electromagnetic spectrum over southern Kherson belonged to Ukraine again. Now, the answer to our question: how many Russian soldiers were guarding the EW complex? The answer is B, 8 to 10. Specifically, the Ukrainian assault teams found 10 Russian personnel at the site, 6 signals operators inside the warehouse, and 2 soldiers in a vehicle outside, plus 2 sentries. This is a relatively small security detail for such a high-value asset, and it reflects a common Russian pattern of underestimating the threat to rear-area installations. The Russians apparently believed that the river barrier and their surveillance posts along the bank provided sufficient protection. They were wrong. The light security detail meant that 16 Ukrainian operators achieved total surprise and overwhelming force superiority at the point of attack. 3 questions to consider. Was the decision to send operators across the river the right call? Or should Ukrainian command have attempted a long-range strike despite the risk of the mobile EW systems relocating? Could Russian forces have prevented this operation by extending their sensor coverage into the reed beds and flooded areas they considered impassable? What would you have done differently if you were planning the defense of a high-value electronic warfare site 3 kilometers behind a major riverfront line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Ukraine Signal, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. Real tactics, real consequences. Ukraine Signal. The Dnipro is quiet now. The warehouse is a charred ruin, its roof collapsed, its walls blackened. The antenna arrays that once projected Russian electronic dominance across 40 kilometers of front are twisted metal and melted circuitry. The reed beds show no trace of the 16 men who passed through them in the dark. But somewhere, a Ukrainian drone operator launches another sortie, guiding a small aircraft over the river and into the sky,